WMC-TV, Memphis.
This is the NBC Television Network.
Well, hey everybody, how's it going? It's been a long day for me. I'm ready to get into some Doc Savage here in a minute, but first I want to do a few shout outs. I want to thank my patrons and supporters: Grindhead Jim Largo, Pope, Rolo at Masters Maniac Mexico, Will McLaughlin, Bjorn Jorgensen, Johnny Sorensen, Ocean Breed Salty, Sir Clifton, Gojatron, Melvor, and Chris Tremblett. Good to have you guys coming in and helping to support this channel and supporting the things that we do here. And let me move over to the comment section, which has been very, very, very lively this evening. Who came in first tonight? Looks like Shaitan's Hammer did. Hey, Shaitan. And then after that, Bjorn Jorgensen, Sham Bollocks, my friend. Shaitan's Hammer says he's waiting for some Doc Savage and listening to radio series Alien Worlds from the 70s and 80s. Pretty good. Bjorn Jorgensen looking forward to learning something. Mr. Eldor from Masterversal Toy Hunter is here. Ratface 44 reviews. Catching this on the replay. Thank you guys. All right, you take care, Ratface 44, and we'll see you on the flip side, man. Moving on down. A lot of chat going on here. Rolando Flores is here. Good to see you, Rolando, man. Glad you came by. Man, you're everywhere. The Epic Badger is here. What's going on, Jesse Hughes? Ted Darkclaw's here. It's about bedtime here. I'm out in for a few. All right, man. Take care. Gojatron in the house. The men of Fantastic and Weird discussed the Man of Bronze tonight. Absolutely, man. Good to see you. Johnny Sorensen in the house. Kane just chokeslammed the fella, but I'll pause that till later. All right, Johnny. All right, moving on down the line. Looks like about got everything caught up. Gojatron asked, how much does Superman owe Doc Savage? Will we find out? I think we will find out. Yes, we will. And Screw Your Feelings is here. He says, ready to listen, learn, and have fun. All right. And Wilhelm Toy and Hobby in the house. What's up, Wilhelm? Good to see you. And everything's Plastic Collectibles and Reviews here for a bit, up in 4 hours for work. Well, you know, work takes precedence there, my friend. All right, everybody. Let's bring old Largo in and let's get started here. What's going on, Largo? The internet being good to you today, man?
So far, so good, as long as we don't jinx it.
Yeah, well, I think I just did probably. Mine's been up and down. Mine's been up and down all afternoon. I mean, I was over there at Everything's Plastic, hanging out with him, and every once in a while I would spin out like I normally do. And I watched I watched my bandwidth go down and up and down and up as we were going through the intro to the show just now. So, you never
Well, I've
know.
got clear skies and a happy rooster, so we should be all right.
Hey, look at there. Ocean breeze salty. Hey, girl, how's it going? Glad you came by to join us. We're going to talk about the man of bronze tonight, Doc Savage.
That will be good. Well, it looks like we're pretty well caught up with the chat. So I
Mm-hmm.
imagine most folks have very little knowledge of the dock unless they're vintage like we are. So might be a bit of an education for some folks, but you'll be surprised how many of your modern heroes owe a tip of the hat to the dock.
Absolutely. Let me go ahead and run that promo real quick for everybody, and then we'll get all set up for everything. How about that, Largo?
Sounds good.
All right. Ted Darkclaw says he's going to leave a like on the way out and check the replay tomorrow on commute. All right, man. You take care and be careful. Bjorn Orson says, would you consider him a superhero or does he come before that? Should I answer that question now or should we let him wait for a little bit?
Oh, well, let's let him stew on it. He'll be all right.
Okay. All right. And Gojatron says, my first exposure to Doc Savage's Marvel 2-in-1 number 21, where he teamed up with none other than Ben Grimm himself, the Thing. Thank Largo for that, Wilhelm. You know he's the one that's able to do all that cool shit for me. I'm not very good at all that, but he is.
Thank you.
OBS says I don't remember Barry this guy, but his name sounds familiar. Just wait and see. OBS, you just take it all in because Doc Savage I think is going to surprise many of you guys. All right, here we go. Let me go ahead and start our slideshow tonight, and I'll let you start out with it there, Largo. Oh,
Alrighty.
I took it out of the stream. My bad.
That's all right.
There you go.
Well,
Get it back up.
there we
There you
go.
go.
So tonight we're going to learn about Clark Savage Jr. A team of scientists assembled by his father deliberately trained his mind and body to near superhuman abilities almost from birth, giving him great strength and endurance, a photographic memory, a mastery of the martial arts, and a vast knowledge of the sciences. Doc is also a master of disguise and an excellent imitator of voices. He is a physician, scientist, adventurer, detective, inventor, explorer, researcher, and, as revealed in the Polar Treasure, a musician. Probably a lover too, but I left that out. Dent described the hero as a mix of Sherlock Holmes' detective abilities, Tarzan's outstanding physical abilities, Craig Kennedy's scientific education, and Abraham Lincoln's goodness. He also described Doc Savage as manifesting Christliness.
Yeah, and I don't know if we go into this too deeply in here, but one of the things that Doc did on a daily basis upon waking up every morning was he went through a rigorous set of exercises to build his body, his mind, and his senses. That included his olfactory senses, his eyes, his sense of feel and touch. Everything about him was exercised on a daily basis in order to keep him at the peak of ability or human abilities. So, going on to slide number 2 here, Doc Savage had an oath that he followed, and the oath went like this: "Let me strive every moment of my life to make myself better and better, to the best of my ability, that all may profit by it. Let me think of the right and lend my assistance to those who need it, with no regard for anything but justice. Let me take what comes with a smile without loss of courage. Let me be considerate of my country, of my fellow citizens and my associates in everything I say and do. Let me do right to all and wrong no man."
Yeah, the writers were definitely a little heavy-handed there, but he's quite the guy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And he did, in fact, in all of his stories, follow this. And there were 181 stories, if I'm not mistaken, and they've all been reprinted in Bantam paperback novels.
Right, and that's not even counting the comic books and everything else that came after.
That's right. Okay. Let you get to slide number 3 there and talk about the Fabulous Five.
Yep. The Doc was quite a specimen on his own, but he did have a super team to work with, and they were called the Fabulous Five. Savage is accompanied on his adventures by up to 5 other regular characters referred to in the 1975 movie and in marketing materials from the Bantam Books republication as the Fabulous Five, all highly accomplished individuals in their own right. Here we have a portrait done by the great James Bama, who did a lot of the cover art for the Doc Savage books. And there's the Fabulous Five right behind the Doc.
And looks like the guy with the cane there, that's Ham. And the little short guy with the red shirt is Monk. And I think we see Rennie and Long Tom and Johnny back there in the background. We'll get to each one of those in just a second. First, we'll start
Mhm.
with Monk Mayfair. Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Blodgett Monk Mayfair, an industrial chemist. Monk got his nickname from his simian build, notably his long arms and coverage of red hair. He is in a constant state of friendly feuing with Ham Brooks. This began when his friend taught him some French words to say to an officer, and Monk repeated them, not knowing that they were a string of insults. The result, of course, was a lengthy stay in the guardhouse. Now, that picture of Monk there is pretty much what you saw in the pulp novels back in the day. Uh, but he was described by Kenneth Robeson, aka Lester Dent. Kenneth Robeson was a house name that was used so they could keep the copyright away from Lester Dent himself. But when he wrote these stories, he described him in very simian terms. And when they talked about his covering of red hair, it wasn't just on his head; it was on his back and on his chest and on his arms and on his legs, and it was pretty thick. Pretty thick. All right, and I'll let you take Ham Brooks there.
All right. Ham Brooks is Brigadier General Theodore Marley Ham Brooks. Boy, that's a mouthful. An accomplished attorney. Ham is considered one of the best dressed men in the world, and as part of his attire, carries a sword cane whose blade is dipped in a fast acting anesthetic. His nickname was acquired when Monk, in retaliation for his guardhouse incarceration, framed Brooks on a charge of stealing hams from the commissary. In the only case which Ham ever lost, he was convicted of stealing the hams. So he's rather the dapper fellow.
Absolutely, and he is a world class attorney. He is like the top attorney in the world. So the only case that he lost was the one in which he was accused of stealing those hams, which is where he gets his name from. All right, let's move on to the next slide. Now, I may dip out like I just did here while you were talking there. So if I do, kind of pick up the slack for me there, Largo, and I apologize for my bandwidth, folks. Colonel John Rennie Renwick as a construction engineer. Rennie is a giant of a man with fists like buckets of gristle and bone. Time is knocking the panels out of heavy wooden doors. Always depression, which deepens the happier he the happier he grows. Excuse me. His favorite expression and frequently used is "Holy cow!" All right, let's move on right on along there, Largo.
Alrighty. All right. So next we have Long Tom. Major Thomas J. Long Tom Roberts is an electrical engineer. Long Tom got his nickname from using an antiquated cannon of that nickname in the successful defense of a French village in World War I. Long Tom was a sickly looking character, but fought like a wildcat.
And moving right along, we've got Johnny Littlejohn. William Harper, Johnny Littlejohn, is an archaeologist and geologist. Johnny has an impressive vocabulary, never using a small word when a big one would suffice. "I'll be super amalgamated" was his favorite expression. Johnny wore eyeglasses with a magnifying lens over his left eye in very early adventures, that eye having been damaged in World War One. Doc later performed corrective surgery that restored Johnny's sight in that eye, but Johnny retained the magnifier as a monocle for use as both a magnifying glass and as a memento. And you can see in our picture there, that's Johnny over there with the monocle in his eye.
Mm-hmm.
And the sixth member of the Fabulous Five.
Right. There is an unofficial member who was always tagging along, and that's Pat Savage, who is Doc's cousin. Patricia Pat Savage, who has Doc's bronze skin, golden eyes, and bronze hair, also is along for many of the adventures despite Doc's best efforts to keep her away from danger. Pat chafes under these restrictions, or indeed any effort to protect her simply because she is female. She is also able to fluster Doc, even as she completely charms Monk and Ham.
Yeah, let's get on to the next slide here. And let's talk about the 86th floor. The 86th floor of a prominent New York City skyscraper, implicitly implied to be the Empire State Building, is reached by Doc's private high-speed elevator. Doc owns a fleet of cars, trucks, aircraft, and boats, which he stores in a secret hangar on the Hudson River under the name of the Hidalgo Trading Company, which is linked to his office by a pneumatic tube system nicknamed the Flea Run. He sometimes also retreats to his, get this, Fortress of Solitude in the Arctic, which predates Superman's similar hideout of the same name.
Indeed. And not to be outdone, Batman gets a nod here too, I think, because when it comes to technology, Lester Dent, who was the main writer for Doc Savage, definitely kept current with scientific developments of his era. While some of Doc's gadgets were simply science fiction, many of his futuristic devices were actual inventions or ideas that engineers were attempting to produce. Futuristic devices described in the series include the flying wing, the answering machine, television, automatic transmission, night vision goggles, electromagnetic rail guns, and a handheld automatic weapon known variously as the machine pistol, the super machine pistol, or the rapid firer. A wide range of ammunition types were used for the machine pistols, including incendiary bullets that smash on contact, coating the target with a high temperature paste fed fire, high explosive bullets able to uproot trees, ordinary lead bullets, and the sleep inducing mercy bullets. Doc also developed an automated typewriter.
Yeah. And what's notable about this is all of these inventions, while they seem to us as passe, things that we're aware of that we've had for many, many years in our technology, when these stories were written, these were out of this world futuristic devices that were just science fiction. But Dent knew that scientists were working on these and had a hand on it, so he added them into the stories to show what would be, and to show that Doc Savage was on top of things.
Mm-hmm.
And our next slide is Doc had villains. Most of his villains only appeared in one story, but he did have one that appeared in more than one. Doc's greatest foe and the only enemy to appear in two of the original pulp stories was the Russian-born John Sunlight. Excuse me. Introduced in October of 1938 in the Fortress of Solitude story. Early villains in the Super Sagas were fantastic schemers bent upon ruling the world. Later, the magazine, which was retitled Doc Savage Science Detective, and Doc dealt with the more conventional criminal organizations in those books. The Super Saga was revived in 1948 by the new editor Daisy Beacon shortly before the final cancellation of the magazine in September 20th of 1948. A letter to Lester Dent, Bacon writes, as long as we're dropping the science detective and returning to just Doc Savage, I think we should return to a real adventure story.
Yeah. So kind of went through a few iterations there, but the main crux of the characters held true and is still being seen in one form or another to this very day. And one particular oddity about this, you have to take it into the context of which it is written. This was the 1930s, and psychology and medical science was in a different place. So, in earlier stories, some of the criminals captured by Doc receive a delicate brain operation to cure their criminal tendencies. These criminals return to society unaware of their past to lead productive lives. The operation is mentioned in Truman Capote's novel In Cold Blood, as the older Kansan recalls Doc's fixing of the criminals he had caught.
I always thought that was a little creepy, but and I think that there was a shadow crossover in contemporary times where the shadow was kind of at odds with Doc about these operations, and they were later downplayed in later stories. But like Largo said, back at that time, people really did think that anything could be cured with modern medical technology.
Yeah.
Medicine or surgery would solve all the problems of the world, including criminal tendencies, I suppose.
Well, like Grandpappy always said, I'd rather have a bottle in front of me than a frontal lobotomy.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the conclusion to this set of slides. But look, Doc Savage has got more to come. So while we digest that a little bit, is there anything that you want to add before we start the next set of slides there, Largo?
I knew somewhat about Doc Savage, but just a cursory knowledge. And I was really amazed as I did a deep dive this last week into how far this rabbit hole goes and how many different literary and superhero and other types of adventure characters Doc Savage has roots and connections to. It's mind boggling. So
Let's
this
let's
being
let
a spotlight, we're not going to cover everything.
Of course not. But let's get in the chat just a little bit before we hit the next set of slides here. I'm moving up here because we missed a whole lot here, and these people are really chatting up a storm. Let's see. The man is a wizard, says Wilhelm Toy Hobby. Absolutely. And moving on down. Doc sounds pretty savage, says OBS.
I see what you
He
did there.
also never he also never missed the tanning bed. Well, I think his skin was a natural bronze color. I think his skin was a natural bronze color. Uh, Johnny Sorensen says Alan Moore did a homage to the character Doc Savage with Tom Strong. We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like he'd make a good provider and dad.
Yeah.
Moving on down, according to one place that Bjorn looked, there were 213 novels.
Yeah, there have been some further things written past the
Yeah,
original
I
pulps.
Kenneth Robeson. Well, actually, Lester Dent, under the house name Kenneth Robeson, wrote the original stories, which were all released by Bantam Books at one point or another, although they were out of order. Let's see. Moving on down. So I want to see a movie now, 1975. No, it's not a hoot at all, but we'll get to that here in a minute.
Yeah, it's more Mystery Science Theater fare.
Yeah, the latest Doc Savage novel came out last year, says Bjorn. Bjorn's been busy doing his homework, folks.
Yep.
I like the bluntness of the naming conventions. Okay. And Brick something says there's some sort of international cabal that determines who the best dressed individuals are.
I think, yeah.
Fists of buckets of gristle and bone. Yeah, his fists were like
Right.
huge, just hams. And so never leave home without your monocle. Yeah, talking about
Right.
and Brick something says a sort of ensemble outsider adventure team storytelling through to GI Joe A-Team. Yeah, it absolutely
Yeah.
was. And he had the adventure team before I guess GI Joe or anybody else had an adventure team. It was a team of heroes.
And
Although it
specialists. Mm-hmm.
kind of towards the end, it was just Monk and Ham and Doc, but they all had their moment in the sun. Can't wait for Superman to go public domain. And,
Yeah.
we'll see about that. Just like Mickey Mouse is going to go, it's not going to happen. Multifunction gun. Yeah, the machine pistol was around before there was such a thing as a machine pistol. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that Fortress of Solitude was stolen from Doc Savage's writer. Who wrote Superman? Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster began Superman. I don't know. It was probably in the Wayne Boring era that that Superman gained his mountain retreat, which eventually became the Fortress of Solitude in the Arctic later on. But yeah, I mean, so much has been borrowed from the Pulp novels, especially from Doc Savage, and we'll get to some of that in the next set of slides here in just a minute. Yes,
right.
yes.
Not stolen, borrowed, homage.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, like Pop Hayden always said, if you steal from enough places, it's not stealing anymore. It's called research.
There you go.
And Bjorn Jorgensen says Doc Savage's Fortress of Solitude predates Superman. It does.
It does.
What does Eldor say? Like a set of lines in Doctor Who, Bill, sir, the curse of Fenric. One day we'll have computers thinking computers, but yes, whose thoughts will think? Well, let's not get into that. I mean, that's another rabbit hole to get into, the AI. And yeah, Doc Savage was basically performing lobotomies on these guys, and that's why I find it so creepy. But at the time, that was not considered out of the ordinary to think that could be a thing. If only Batman had used that on the Joker, right? Can't cure stupid. No, there is no cure for stupid. Stupid can only be beaten.
Indeed.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest didn't work out too well for old Jack either, did it? Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
And what's Bjorn saying here? A shorter list would be one.
One he didn't inspire.
That's true. Have Chris say here. Have a good stream, guys. All right, you take care, Chris. I'll see you on the flip side, man. And let's get on down here and see what else is going on here.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, here I'm back. If you like crazy campy movies, and then that 1975 Ron Eli movie's right up your alley.
Yeah,
most writers.
It's very campy.
Sorry. most writers of the era borrow liberally from what was popular in the classics. Sherlock Holmes, Zorro, Moses, Shadow, Samson, Hercules, Phantom. That's true. And as a matter of fact, a lot of these writers, we were going to cover some of that with Tarzan. They were not only contemporaries of one another, they were friends with each other, and they borrowed ideas.
Yeah, they definitely collaborated in one way or another, and sometimes would just liberally give each other ideas, or they would even write together, or they would do what we call round robin writing, where one guy would start a story and someone else would pick it up. So there's a lot of collaboration, and yeah, there's quite a bit of just ripping off too. So there were some rivalries, and it gets interesting. I mean, that is definitely a rabbit hole of just looking at all of the different guys who were writing and taking ideas from one another back and forth. Big
Oh,
Jim
of
is
course,
another
Big
one.
Jim's pack, absolutely. And Ocean Breeze Sauce says, "Oh, is that what they call it? Homage." There's another word also called pastiche. We'll get into that as
Mm,
well.
yes.
Of course, I am. You know, my internet's is really crappy, so it's always going to be that way. So when that happens, we just keep on trucking. And it says, yeah, but that's very specific, the exact name. So they didn't go after each other for those copyrights. No, they
Nah.
absolutely not. They were making money writing cheap fiction, and most of them didn't really care too much about what they were writing. They were just trying to make the money, and that's the
Right.
truth.
And a lot of these guys, they weren't trying to build some sort of literary legacy. They were just write for a day, laborers. They
Yeah,
would write anything for anybody. Some of them were hacks, as they called them. They just like, what do you want me to write? Okay, what's the back? Okay, never mind. I'll just make it up as I go, and they would.
yeah, absolutely. And this was back in the day when when individuals didn't own anything. It was the big guys that owned the stuff. For instance, Lester Dent never wrote a single Doc Savage story under his own name. It was always Kenneth Robeson, which was the house
Mhm.
name,
Right.
because Street and Smith owned this character outright.
Yeah, and that's a good point to jump into our next slideshow, where we'll talk about some of the literary origins of the doc and how all this ties together.
All right, here we go. I'll start with the first slide here. Doc Savage, pulp hero. Doc Savage is a fictional character of the competent man hero type, first appearing in pulp magazines during the 1930s and 40s under the name Clark Savage Jr. He is a doctor, scientist, adventurer, detective, and polymath who rights wrongs and punishes evildoers. He was created by publisher Henry W. Ralston and editor John L. Nanovic at Street and Smith Publications, with additional material contributed by the series' main writer Lester Dent, who once again operated under the name Kenneth Robeson. So we'll
Right.
move on to the next slide. Here you go, there,
Mm-hmm.
Largo.
Dateline 1933. So that was the year that we first see Doc Savage. Just under 2 years after The Shadow appeared on magazine racks, Doc Savage became the third pulp character to get his own magazine. The world met the Man of Bronze in a novel titled The Man of Bronze, appropriately enough, in March of 1933. Doc Savage was created by Street and Smith's Henry W. Ralston with the help of editor John L. Nanovic, as we just mentioned, in order to capitalize on the surprise success of the Shadow magazine. It was, however, Lester Dent who crafted the character into the Superman that he became. And there you see an image from that March 33 issue.
And of course, Doc Doc looked like that on most of these old pulp magazine covers. It was later in the Bantam novels that he gained the look that we so give to Doc
Associated.
Savage. Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
get to that here in a minute. Doc's dad. Here he is. Here's the man, Lester Dent, born on October the 12th, 1904, and he died on March the 11th of 1959. An American pulp fiction writer, best known as the creator and main writer of a series of novels about the scientist and adventurer Doc Savage. 159 Doc Savage novels were written by Dent, written over 16 years, but credited into the house name Kenneth Robeson. That way, he couldn't claim copyright or to any of that. It was all owned by Street and Smith.
Right. But at least in later years, he was given. I mean, people knew that he was the writer.
Right.
So, not that it didn't help him monetarily, but people at least acknowledged what he had created.
Absolutely.
Now, he did have a sort of a formula, a very formulaic way of writing the doc. I did not include that here, but do you remember what the formula was there, Bill?
I'm not exactly, but it kind of went somewhere along these lines. You take the hero and you put him into a terrible situation and you heap misery upon him. And then you heap more misery upon him. And then you heap even more misery upon him. And until he reaches a point to where he can't possibly get out of it. And then and only then he begins to find his way out of his predicament. And that's sort of kind of the way it went. And if you read these stories, they do follow that. And he found that formula worked well for him and well with the character, and it resonated well with people who read the novels. Now, me personally, I was introduced to Doc Savage probably in the late '80s and early '90s, and that's where I started picking up Doc Savage comics.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize that the character was so deep until many years later when I looked into a bunch of paperbacks when the library that I was working for at the time decided that they were going to divest themselves of paperbacks, and I got a nice little cache of the Bantam novels that were basically reprints of the old pulp stuff, and that's where I got my first introduction to Doc Savage when I read the first one, The Man of Bronze. And I will tell you this: they're hard to put down. And once you start reading them, it's kind of the only other author that would keep me in stitches like that is Edgar Rice Burroughs. He did the same thing. I mean, it just kept on and on and on. And because these were pulp novels, many of the chapters would end on cliffhangers to be resolved in the next chapter. So once you reach an end of the chapter, you're not done, because now you got to get into the next chapter to find out how he gets himself out of whatever predicament that he's in that
Right.
one.
And a lot of these stories were definitely the prototypes for the way that, people in the comic industry would write their heroes. And also in the films. I mean, literally, the cliffhanger films were a direct descendant of these types of Doc Savage stories.
Mm-hmm.
And
he moved on into the comics. I'll let you read this slide.
yeah, he actually debuted in the pages of Shadow Comics. We all have heard of the Shadow. We'll be talking about him more in future episodes. So he was in Shadow Comics that starred his fellow pulp hero, the Shadow. His early comic stories closely matched the novel adventures. He briefly got his own series, which devolved quickly into standard superhero fare before returning to the pages of Shadow Comics as a regular feature. That arrangement continued until the series ended in 1949.
And I'm going to assume, because I'm ignorant of this particular fact, that these comics were probably done by Street and Smith, not by our favorites.
Right.
I guess at the time it was Atlas Comics or Marvel Comics or Detective Comics or DC Comics. They weren't doing this character because Street and Smith owned him, and they weren't going to let anybody else do this with themselves.
Right. Yeah, this was Street and Smith. Those all came a little bit later.
And who can we see here on the cover of that over here in the corner that's in this book as well, besides Shadow and Doc Savage? I see Doc there.
Yep.
I can't read these names. They're too little for me.
Yeah, I cannot read them either. A couple of them I did not recognize. They were military type heroes, guys who were kind of mercenaries left over from World War I who were seeking adventure. The only two real notable ones were Doc Savage and the Shadow.
Absolutely. Uh, from 1940 to 1943, Doc Savage appeared in comics. The writer is unknown, but the artist was Harry Kiefer, who may have drawn the Shadow comic strips earlier. Doc is portrayed often in fighting positions. Excuse me. Johnny, Rennie, and Long Tom are never shown. When Doc goes to the land of dinosaurs, he only takes Monk with him. In the novel, all 6 characters of them go. From the very beginning, the artists and writers reduced the number of characters either because it was too hard to draw so many characters, but more likely because they wanted to put the spotlight on Doc. Even in the novels, Lester Dent would sometimes sideline an aide or two because it was too cumbersome to have all 6 people do all those amazing things. Yeah, that brings up a point. I mean, it was said in the past, why does Doc have the Fabulous Five when he's smarter than all of them and spends most of his time getting them out of the trouble that they get into? And later on, pretty much it was only Ham and Monk because they were the most notable of the Fabulous Five anyway. So
Yeah, a lot of people who write ensemble or group or team type stories run into this where they have to spotlight a couple here and there, or they can't put them all in the adventure. It's too much. And
yeah,
as you can see from the style here, it's very rudimentary. A lot of these early pulp comics were basically just a continuation of the strip comics that were in newspapers. Very primitive style of art, and they're these were not the best artists. They weren't like the guys who came later who really honed that craft. So they tried to keep it as simple as possible, but to keep the action and the energy going. And
oh, and yeah,
this is very. I was going to say this is very reminiscent of early Alexander Raymond. When you look at Flash Gordon, some of his early stuff, it's very
yeah.
similar style.
Well, and the other thing you have to remember too, these guys weren't given very long deadlines. They had to crank this stuff out
Right.
fast. Doc Savage in the novels. Doc Savage became known to more contemporary readers when the Bantam book series began, reprinting the individual magazine novels in 1964. This time with covers by artist James Bama that featured a bronze-haired, bronze-skinned Doc Savage with an exaggerated widow's peak, usually wearing a torn khaki shirt underneath the byline of Kenneth Robeson. And this is where we get our Doc Savage look. Now, this first picture that you see over here, he still has that brown bronze hair, and in his widow's peak, you can see it there, but you can tell that it's hair. But it becomes even more exaggerated as time goes on.
Right. But this is the Doc that a lot of us were first introduced to was from these novels, and I clearly remember that logo going through used bookstores and places, and they are like Bill said, these are great reads. They're fun. They've got high energy. The pacing is really good, and they're still good to read now, even though some of the stories are a little dated as far as technology or politics. If you read them in the context of when they were written and what they're dealing with, it's a great adventure.
They're a
And
period piece. They're a period
yeah,
piece. As a matter of fact, I would think and I would hope that if any of the projects that are been in development hell for the last 20 years ever come to fruition, that they maintain the period piece aspect of it. I know at one time Dwayne the Rock Johnson was in running to be in a Doc Savage movie, which later was going to be a Doc Savage television series, which is
yeah, they've been
last
working
I heard,
on
2016 or 2017. It's
yeah. That's pretty much that pretty much has died. But there have been several uh, television and movie scripts and treatments and ideas for trying to bring this character back, but nothing's come to fruition. And considering the state of Hollywood today, I'm kind of glad they haven't, because I'm sure they would muck it up badly.
more than likely.
So moving on. Now, James Bama, as we've mentioned, was a fantastic artist, and as you can see, he did some very lifelike paintings for some of these novels. And this is a great example. This is probably the most classic one that people are familiar with. So, beginning with the Man of Bronze in 1964, James Bama did a set powerful set of 62 covers for the Doc Savage Bantam book paperbacks, often using as a model actor Steve Holland, who was the star of TV's Flash Gordon from 1954 to 1955. And there you can see Mr. Holland on the side there. I've actually watched him as Flash Gordon in some reruns and on DVD, and he did a pretty good job. And he definitely had the physique to be a model for a lot of these type of heroic characters. So very similar to the style of Alex Ross in modern day, where Alex will use a live model to reference his photorealistic type of art that he does. You know, James Bama was doing this back in the day. So as Bjorn mentioned, there have been other novels beyond the original pulps, and one of particular note was written by Philip Jose Farmer, and he's a writer of some note. We mentioned him when we talked about Tarzan before. So Doc Savage, his Apocalyptic Life, is a fictional biography by Philip Jose Farmer about pulp fiction hero Doc Savage. The book is written with the assumption that Doc Savage was a real person. Kenneth Roberson, the author of the Doc Savage novels, who we know as Lester Dent, is portrayed as writing fictionalized memoirs of the real Savage's life. Farmer examines the psychological makeup of Doc and his associates based on close readings of all 181 novels at that time. In the appendix, The Fabulous Family Tree of Doc Savage, Farmer links Savage to dozens of other fictional characters as a member of the Wold Newton family. So Farmer had a very unique idea where he believed that and I think he really did believe this, it wasn't just in his fiction. He believed that many of these heroic characters were archetypes that had some kernel of truth behind them, that someone had either met someone of this caliber and then had exaggerated them and created these fictional characters. So he had linked together Doc Savage, Tarzan, Sherlock Holmes, all of these different, great characters, and founded a sort of what he called a family tree. And Doc was certainly a prominent member of that.
Yeah, and another thing about the Wall Newton family, I mean, you can go into that, and it's a rabbit hole, and it's deep, folks. If you want to hit it, do. I guarantee you'll have a week's worth of reading and fun. But if I'm not mistaken, the name Savage and the characterization of Doc himself was based upon a real man anyway. And I can't remember his last name was Savage. I can't remember what his first name was. Did you see that when you were going through your research there, Largo?
It was alluded to, but there wasn't any confirmation. But yeah, I do believe that either Lester Dent himself or someone else in the publishing house had a relationship with someone who was probably a World War I veteran. Mm-hmm. And that's probably the basis for where some of the ideas came from. And then they just expanded beyond to that. Or it was an amalgamation of a couple of different people that they knew.
And now we get finally to the 1975 Ron Ely Doc Savage film. Doc Savage, The Man of Bronze, was released in 1975 as an American action film starring Ron Ely as the pulp hero Doc Savage. This was the last film completed by pioneering science producer George Powell. That says everything you need to know right there. It was directed by Michael Anderson. And going back to the comics in contemporary 1972, saw Doc return to the comic pages with all new full color series from Marvel Comics. And their magazine imprint published 8 issues of a black and white comic stories gathered together to adult readers. Doc appeared in team-ups with Spider-Man, The Thing, Gojatron, and a giant-sized issue reprint of the first 2 issues of the series from 3 years earlier.
Right. So on and off, he had been back and forth. He was in Marvel. Then later on, he was in DC. He's been in, I think, Dynamite comics have used him. So he's been around as himself. But now we're going to look into what other characters have derived some of their attributes from Doc Savage. So we'll just go through the bullet points of what we know about Doc Savage and compare that with certain other individuals. So the Doc was raised from birth to be a champion of men and a hero. He underwent extensive training by a variety of expert tutors to allow him to reach the peak of human potential both mentally and physically. His father was slain in his very first adventure, which lent impetus to his path. His operations were funded by a seemingly endless cache of Mayan gold discovered by his father. Let's see. Rich because his daddy left him money. His parents died and kind of set him on it. He's been training since he was a kid. Who does this sound like? Yeah. Very, very much a lot of what we know of Master Bruce Wayne comes from Doc Savage.
Not just Batman either.
No.
It's a given fact that his first name Clark was lifted by Siegel and Schuster as the name for Superman's secret identity, Clark.
Right. Yeah, there were quite a few things that both Superman and Batman can directly point to Doc Savage as to where they got them from. I will mention I didn't put it into the slides here because there was so much information.
Mm-hmm.
The utility belt. Someone did mention this in one of our earlier chats. The Batman utility belt originally came from Doc Savage as well, except he used a harness. He had a vest that had all of his gadgets that he could possibly need, and he could pull something from a pouch whenever he needed it, just like Batman could pull it from his belt.
And of course, the novel covers always show him in that ripped up shirt, but they never did show the utility vest. But it was mentioned always in every story, kind of like the morning exercise routine. There was always at least 3 or 4 paragraphs that were devoted in every book to him going through all these ritual exercises and of course the utility vest as well. Now, let's think about other sets of characters that might have derived from Savage. He had a headquarters on the 86th floor of a prominent New York skyscraper, which keeps him right in the heart of America's most major city and available to any imminent crisis in the world. He's on good terms with the local police, often called upon for aid. He uses a tremendous amount of gadgetry, the majority of which is designed by himself. In his pursuit of justice, he has a team of aides, his Fabulous Five, which are the template of the superhero team-ups, each a master in his own craft. And there we see Jack Kirby's Challengers of the Unknown, which, all of these team-up characters like this can you can look in their roots and you can see Doc Savage and the Fabulous Five lurking there.
Oh, absolutely. And not to mention the Fantastic Four and their Baxter building in New York. I mean, there's a lot of team hero groups that can definitely draw a line back to Savage. This one's probably the most blatant copy.
Go ahead, Largo.
All right. Doc had his own private place apart from others, and it was in the Arctic, and it was called the Fortress of Solitude. Having no superpowers at all, Doc and his aides made a crusade out of seeking out and fighting evil wherever it may be found. Doc had a no-kill policy and even invented mercy bullets, which would render an opponent unconscious for a time. Doc himself, his credo, and his accomplishments afforded him respect from even the highest office. Even Doc's trademark poses with ripped shirts were copied by many. Yeah.
And as I said before, even his first name was lifted to be used as the big red S there, secret identity first name. So yeah, I mean, and the chat was talking about the Fortress of Solitude and whether they were ripping Doc Savage off by doing that. I wouldn't necessarily say that so much as giving homage to him. And yeah, I'm using that word, but
right. Although it is interesting to note that the Superman fortress was originally a fort in the jungle. It wasn't in the Arctic. And
Hmm.
then he later got the Arctic one, which was directly inspired from this novel, The
Yeah,
Fortress of
and it
Solitude.
wasn't called the Fortress of Solitude, I don't think, until the '60s anyway, if I'm
Right.
not mistaken. I mean, for the longest time, it was his mountain retreat or the one you were talking about. So yeah, he's always had a base, but it was called the Fortress of Solitude in the '60s, and I think by that time, Dockett had been long gone,
Right.
but he was still in the popular memory. And now let's talk about pastiches. We were talking about that earlier. Alan Moore, of course, did Tom Strong. And then we see our friend over there, Buckaroo Banzai. And let's talk about what pastiche means. It's an artistic work in a style that imitates that of another work, artist, or period. And I'll let you talk about Buckaroo Banzai because I think you're a big Buckaroo Banzai fan, are you
I
not?
am. I like Buckaroo Banzai. It was a quirky little film, very 80s, and it is a direct, I wouldn't say it's a parody, but it's a direct homage to Doc Savage and his Fabulous Five. He had a
Mm,
team, and each member of the team was a specialist who was also a little eccentric. Buckaroo Banzai was a surgeon. He was an inventor. He was a dancer. He was a musician. He was everything Doc Savage was. So it was
mm.
basically a modern interpretation. And
Now,
of course,
was that movie also based upon a set of books about Buckaroo Banzai?
to my knowledge, there was a comic book or a graphic novel. There was something that was based on, but there wasn't a whole lot of
Mm.
previous information. And he's kind of stayed in the zeitgeist, but nothing further went from it. But yeah, definitely a lot of it is directly Doc Savage stuff, and the same with Tom Strong. As was mentioned earlier in the chat, Tom Strong is another great character, very heroic, and has a special team that works with him. And even some of his inventions and adventures are direct uh, pastiche of Doc Savage.
I'm looking at that gorilla over there in the corner, and I'm thinking about Monk Mayfair. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, and the well dressed robot is very much reminiscent of another member of the team. And as he had his cousin Patricia, Doc or Tom Strong had a very willful daughter who wanted to follow in his footsteps. So yeah, a lot of similarities. One other one that a lot of people didn't know, I didn't know until I started doing the research. You guys know about the Rocketeer. Well, in the film, which is what most people, unless you've read Dave Stevens' original comic books, you saw the Disney film. And in that film, credit for the invention of the rocket pack was given to Howard Hughes. But Dave Stevens, in his original comic books, said the rocket pack was the invention of a mysterious eccentric he never named, but it was alluded to that it was definitely Doc Savage, a
Oh,
retired, grizzled, older Doc Savage.
but if you read the comic and you saw the interpretation of the two characters who came to retrieve the rocket pack,
Mm-hmm.
they weren't named, but they were drawn. And one of them was a red-haired simian-looking man, and the other one was a real well-dressed, tall gentleman with a bowler hat and a cane with a sword inside of it.
Hmm.
Who could they be?
Exactly. So that's the spotlight of Doc Savage. I mean, I could probably do several more weeks of just going into the Doc, but I think we've given everybody a good general idea of.
Absolutely, and we should have piqued their interest to the point where they're going to do like Bjorn's.
Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. So let's see what folks in the chat have been saying. Wow. Yeah, everybody's kind of been going through and go back here a little bit. Let's see. Yeah. Goji mentions that, yeah, Alan Moore also worked. Doc Savage into his League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, along with Alan Quatermain and the rest. Um, yeah, there's definitely been a lot of team ups and others, a lot of orphan superheroes. That's been a trope, and I think you could say that probably started with Doc Savage as well. And let's see. Oh yeah, Bond. Yeah, OBS mentions James Bond. We've talked about Ian Fleming and how he also was probably, if he didn't inspire the character Bond himself, it was certainly people he knew and worked with.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic Four, Justice League, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, all of these, you can go right back to it. The Mercy bullets were used by the Punisher in Marvel Comics, and those were invented by Doc Savage.
I didn't know Punisher used mercy bullets. I thought he used real bullets and killed everybody.
Well, that didn't really fly with the Comics Code Authority when the Punisher first showed up. So, as he went from being a villain to a vigilante, he stopped killing and just went to maiming and injuring, which somehow that was okay.
Yeah. All right. Keep on going, man. I'm enjoying seeing what you're pulling up here.
All right. OBS is wondering about the what group had the Wonder Twins with the rings.
He's probably thinking about the Super Friends, right?
Right.
And they didn't have rings, did they?
No, they didn't have rings. There was a really horrific cartoon where the Thing had 2 rings, and he would.
Oh, let's not talk about that. That's
okay. Let's not go there. Yeah, if you can think of it, it's probably been inspired by Doc Savage. That's fair enough. Yep. Jones are talking about the mercy bullets. Were reserved for innocents or folks he decided to spare. So, yeah. And Buckaroo Banzai. A lot of people like Buckaroo Banzai. Peter Weller was really good in that, as well as RoboCop. Yeah. RoboCop is great. I agree. Wonder Twins was Super Friends. And the rings, that's right. The flight rings came from the Legion of Superheroes.
Yeah. Okay.
Good call, Johnny. All righty. Yeah, when they just had to touch in order to activate their Wonder Twin powers.
Yeah, they would touch fingers or touch hands, and the Wonder Twin powers activate.
Right. Tom Strong is definitely worth a look if you like adventure stories. America's Best Comics was the name of the publishing group, and they're still out there in reprints. Rocketeer. Oh yeah, Jennifer Connelly. We'll go down the Rocketeer rabbit hole one of these days, but her character was originally in the Dave Stevens comic books an homage to Betty Page, the pinup girl.
Yeah,
but of course they couldn't call her right. They couldn't call her Betty in the movie. Mm-hmm. That would have got them into some trouble, so they had to change the character.
As a matter of fact, I'll go ahead and throw this out there, Largo, against all wishes. There was absolutely a scene in the Rocketeer comics where Betty was in a state of disrobement, and what could have been Irving Claw was back there behind the camera taking pictures of her. So yeah, it was Betty Page.
It was Betty Page, yeah. Well, I'm glad that Wilhelm enjoyed this, found it informative and entertaining, and hopefully you'll like whatever we come up with next. Yep, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the comics, Alan Moore's work was definitely much better than the film, but the film was, a good popcorn evening. Mm-hmm. And the Punisher movies, oh boy. Yeah, some of those were good, some of them kind of touch and go. She's still on about the touching rings.
Okay.
Lord of the Things. Wait, what a revolting development. I think we're caught up with the chat. Or the chat's caught up with us, one or the other. But this has been interesting, to say the least.
Gojatron, the Venture Brothers is a parody of Johnny Quest, which is definitely influenced by pulp heroes.
That brings up a great point, Goji. In the Venture Brothers, there was an episode where Rusty, the father who's based on Johnny Quest's dad, are you familiar with the Venture Brothers cartoon, Bill?
Yes, I'm familiar with it, but I haven't really watched much of it.
Okay, it is definitely a parody of Johnny Quest. And in this one, the scientist father is kind of an idiot, and he's never really invented anything. His father invented everything and left it to him. His father also was immensely wealthy and left him his wealth. So he's been pretending to be a great scientist, but he's an idiot. You find out later that the father, who has been long lost, which is the grandfather of the two kids, the Venture Brothers, uh, is pretty much Doc Savage in everything but name.
Mm-hmm.
He was Doc Savage.
And Bjorn wants to know: have we answered the question of whether or not Doc Savage is a superhero? Well, he's certainly a hero. And if you look at what he's done and you compare him to certain caped and cowled characters who swing by the night, who is a superhero in everything, I would say Doc is a superhero. Stan Lee, I'm sure everybody here respects that name, said that Doc was the prototype of the superhero.
Yeah. So yeah, he was. He just wasn't a masked vigilante. He was an adventurer and the prototype.
Uh, Rolo says a very well prepared panel, and he loves our format. We've got something going. We think so as well.
Thank
there,
you.
Rolo. And OBS agrees that she would think of Doc as a superhero, especially considering that he was like the best at everything he ever did.
Right. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen movie twist. Yeah, they. I wish they wouldn't do that. If they would just stick to whatever was written in the books, there's already a great story there. When directors get this idea for artistic license, they tend to goof up. The bodyguard Brock was based on Race Banyan in the Johnny Quest stuff, which would probably be a good correlation to one of the Fabulous Five. I would say probably Remy.
Mm-hmm. And Shaden's Hammer says they did get Nemo right in the movie. Absolutely, they did. And Nemo usually is not portrayed as he was in the novels that were written by Jules Verne. So, yes, they did get Nemo right. Adventure Brothers on Adult Swim. They were good in the beginning, but it's pretty twisted. Yeah.
It is very twisted. But yeah, it's definitely parody. It's fun.
Johnny Sorkin says, I call him a science hero as he predates the genre or medium.
Yeah, that's fair.
He's at the root of the genre or medium. The genre or medium wouldn't exist without him. So, yeah. Race Bannon's one of Bjorn Jorgensen's favorite characters.
I like him too.
Apparently, the word superhero dates back to 1899. Bjorn's still working on his homework there, guys.
Yeah. Well, I guess if you look back at some of the Jules Vernian characters, they would be considered either science hero or superhero types.
Black Knight showing up in the chat right as we get towards the end. What's going on, Black Knight? Good to see you. Have you been drinking on some of them steel reserves there?
Nothing wrong with that.
Right. So that kind of gets us caught up with chat and kind of gets us towards the end of our look at Doc Savage. Once again, we ask you to get down into the comments, not here in the chat, but the comments below as soon as this is over with. When they open up, put in characters that you might like to see us do these spotlights on. I think we've already got our next spotlight character coming up. You want to go ahead and tell them what it is, Largo, or you want to make them wait?
I think, well, I don't have a teaser. I'm sorry, I haven't had time to build one, but y'all know who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men. The shadow knows.
Absolutely.
So we will be deep diving into Mr. Cranston and see what goes on with the shadow. Unfortunately, a lot of people only know him from that god awful Alec Baldwin movie. He's a much more interesting character than how he was portrayed in that film. So
Yeah.
we'll go into that.
Well, that film, in my opinion, was a parody of itself in that it took every pop culture idea of the Shadow and tried to put it all together into that movie, and it didn't work too well.
No, it
And
had
yeah, I
moments.
kind of agree with what Gojitron, excuse me,
Oh
is
yeah.
saying there about Mr. Hyde. Go ahead there, Largo. Sorry to step on you there,
Oh
sir.
no, that's all right. Yeah, Mr. Hyde, as Alan Moore wrote him, was not possible to put on the screen. He was quite
Uh-uh.
despicable.
No, especially what he did to the Invisible Man.
Indeed. So yeah, we'll continue our pulp heroes with the Shadow, and we have been looking at the comments from last week, and we will more than likely start building some shows based on some of your suggestions. So we're doing some research into that. We're going to get away from the pulp heroes and get into some of the other weird, fantastic stuff as we continue this series. So keep those suggestions coming, and we'll get to them as we can.
And Shayton's Hammer brings up a good point. Some of the Shadow radio dramas on YouTube, and something that we
Ooh,
didn't cover here in the Doc Savage was the fact that there was a Doc Savage radio show,
that's true.
none of which exists today. Some of the scripts I think have been redone on like PBS or something like that, but the old radio show is no longer in existence. There's no known copies of any of it available,
Right.
but it
Some of those
was.
early radio shows were done live. I mean, they would literally read them on the wire, and there wasn't any recording.
Mm-hmm. And Johnny Sorensen says Superhero by Pete Coogan is a great read and reference material. Okay.
There
You're
are,
our superhero, Majestic Tiger,
yes,
Bjorn.
there are several tiger-themed heroes. I will keep that under advisement. Bronze Tiger comes to mind. White Tiger.
Yes, archive.org is a good source of public domain materials that
Mm-hmm.
are good to listen to from the olden days as far as that goes. So like I said earlier, hopefully this kind of widens your view, and you can see where a lot of the ideas for some of the modern stories that we tell today, some of the superheroes of contemporary times have gotten their root from.
Yeah.
What brought this to be was uh, some of the pulp heroes, including our friend here, Doc Savage.
And Doc Savage is still in publication. He was in a DC comic as late as last year. He did have a comic run with DC, and there have been other novels. He just doesn't have the widespread popularity that he deserves because he's been overshadowed by the people who borrowed from him and went on to do other things. So
Well, it gets to the point to where whenever you bring a character like Doc Savage back, who's left the public consciousness, and you bring him back, people look at him and go, "Oh, he's just ripping off blah blah blah," when in actuality, blah 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 was ripping him off to begin with.
right, but a lot of people don't realize that.
It
However, if
kind of like,
you are interested in the Man of Bronze, there is a plethora of information. A lot of it's free. A lot of my research I found either through Wikipedia or fan pages. He's got a lot of fan pages. So feel free to dig in the interwebs and see what you can find. The novels are still in print. Like I said, there's still modern stuff that's being produced. And maybe one of these days I'll get a film done right, but I'm not going to hold my breath on that.
and Shaitan's Hammer says all of this has happened before and will happen again.
Yes,
Star Galactica.
indeed.
But yeah, there's a plethora of information on the internet about Doc Savage. There's a whole website.
Yeah, there's a few websites that are totally devoted to Doc Savage, the Shadow. All these guys have fanzines and even with Tarzan, who we covered last time, again, there's a lot of fan material that's out there. A lot of it's labors of love, just people who really enjoy this stuff and are trying to keep it archived so that people in the future will have a chance to enjoy these as well. Did they make any action figures? Unfortunately, no. However, again, with fans, there have been custom Doc Savage figures and Fabulous Five figures. I've seen a few of those that have been posted on the internet, and they're not bad. You could certainly make one. Our buddy Bjorn is really good at doing custom figures in the 1/18 scale. And with some of the Marauders and some of the Western figures that he's done, you could easily knock together a good Doc Savage. And I think he's already working on a prototype. So we'll stay tuned to Bjorn's Instagram and see what he comes up with. Oh, Bjorn has a new Instagram, Majestic. Help me out, Bjorn. I forgot. Is it Majestic Productions, Majestic Customs?
Bjorn.
But he has a second Instagram that is specifically for his custom creations that he's doing. Some of them are in the Fallout universe. Some of them are his own customs for a sci-fi western kind of thing. And as I mentioned, he's working on a Doc Savage. He's working. I think he's done a Race Banyan from Johnny Quest. So, yeah, he is currently working on the Doc. So that'll be cool to see.
Yeah, I was gonna say earlier before I spun out that our majestic friend Bjorn was working on a Doc Savage action figure, and he has shown me the picture of the prototype that he's working from. So it's going to look pretty sweet when he gets done with it. And there it is, Majestic Customs on Instagram. It's got underscores at the beginning and end, so don't forget the underscores.
Right. And I agree with Johnny Sorensen. G.I. Joe definitely has a lot to. If you wanted to have a good Doc Savage, you could certainly get a G.I. Joe and some of his Adventure Team accessories, and you'd be on your way.
Yeah, I was gonna say the what became the G.I. Joe Adventure Team, which also became, I think, Action Joe towards the end of that run.
Super Joe
is a good example.
Yeah. And of course, the Palatoy version of Action Man also had an Adventure Team as they got.
And of course, Gojitron always coming through for us. There was a 1/6 scale Doc Savage action figure from 2013.
Wow, I did not know they'd actually made an official licensed one. That's cool. I have to check that out. It's probably insanely expensive because it's rare.
Yeah. I would not doubt that with the Shadow action figure that we've already heard announced recently, that a Doc Savage can't be anywhere but right around the corner.
If anybody would do it, I would think Mezco might, because they've already announced they're going to do Dick Tracy. Now they're doing the Shadow. They're covering a lot of the pulp type heroes, and the type of figures that they make, which use the cloth goods, totally made for doing those kind of heroes. So it would definitely make sense. And they have done their own parody or homage type character, which they call Doc something. But he's kind of a monster hunter, and he's very much a Doc Savage type. So Doc Nocturnal, I think, was the name they gave him.
Once again, I'm going to go back to Philip Jose Farmer. He did some novels that were pretty blatant. Tarzan and Doc Savage, but I think it was Lord Granrith and Doc Caliban. They're borderline pornographic, but if you want to read those, they're out there, and they're not bad reads. It kind of goes down a interesting path.
They're manly men, and they have needs, and yeah, they get a little steamy, a little spicy.
Shadow is on his list as well.
Cool.
There's also a Shadow site out there similar to the Doc Savage site, run by the same group, probably Condé Nast behind it somewhere making some money, where you can buy even Shadow neck gaiters, so that you can walk around with a red neck gaiter over your face to look like the Shadow.
Indeed.
But yeah, that kind of brings us to the end of tonight's show. If you guys have any questions, now's the time to ask before we get ready to put this one to bed. But I think we did pretty good tonight. What do you think there, Largo?
Well, I think we just scratched the surface. Like I said, there is so much material on the dock, just like with some of the other heroes we're going to be covering in future weeks. The spotlight can only do so much for the time we have allotted. But
The purpose of the spotlight is not to go into too much depth, because we kind of want to pique the interest of our viewers so that they will want to seek this character out. So
fair enough.
we give you enough to whet your appetite, but it's going to be up to you to seek out the more. And there is more, much more. It
There
goes a
is
lot.
much more.
Yeah. And one of these days, when we run out of material to do, we may return to these characters to go into a little more depth. You never know. So just stay tuned, folks. Thank you, Bjorn. And thank you, everyone. We certainly had a great time tonight. Glad everybody showed up. And I'm glad the internet kind of helped me out a little bit. I mean, I spun out a couple of times. Largo, you were there to keep up the slack. The internet was good to you tonight. So
yeah, Eduardo was being kind.
Good to us all. Yeah, I didn't hear him
Black
one
Knight.
time. Was he back there anywhere?
No, not tonight. Like I said, he's been behaving. Black Knight, glad you caught it. Please do catch the replay and check out Tarzan from last week as well. You'll enjoy that.
And thanks, Wilhelm. We're glad you were able to be here with us tonight. And we'll see you all next time. Good journey, everybody. Special thanks to these supporters on Patreon. Without your help, these adventures would not be possible. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed today's adventure, please hit like and subscribe and share the video.